dinner after church, I would always say this. I would say there's three things that are difficult for a preacher. I'm going to have to add a fourth regarding today. Typically, there's three things difficult for a preacher. Or difficult, just difficult. Three things that are difficult. One, climbing a fence that's leaning toward you. Right? Two, kissing a girl who's leaning away from you. Right? The third one was preaching to Baptists when there's a dinner waiting. Right? So now I've got to add a fourth one. Preaching to Baptists who have been involved in a lock-in over the weekend. I'm going to keep you folks awake. Well, you put yourself through it, that's your fault. Okay, now I knew that. Brother Frankie was the only smart one. All right. Mark chapter 4, beginning of verse 35, I would think that most of us in some way or another are familiar with the scene that is taking place here. It's one that gives us help. It's one that gives us encouragement when life is stormy and we feel like things are out of control, or at least like we're not in control. You know, there's something that we can hold on to as this scene unfolds, even before we get to the storm. If we look at it in verse 35, it says, "On that day, when evening came, he, Jesus, said to them, his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.'" Now, we can make this the single point of the teaching. I can make this the single point of the sermon and realize that the rest of it's just the details that we can relate to. But we get to this word that Jesus spoke in this immediate context, and then we need to see how it applies to us in our own lives, how it can apply to our own salvation. Jesus said they were going to make it to the other side, period. That was it. Regardless of what came between this side and the other side, they were going to make it over. Now, I will be very quick to say this. This is not to be taken as a guarantee, kind of like a guaranteed pass for us on any and every difficult situation that we encounter that comes our way or that we find ourselves in. That would be foolish to proclaim, and I will just say you would be foolish to believe something like that. What is the other side for us in regard to our spiritual life is real, and that is heaven. And that is the other side that we can hold on to as a guarantee of things. If you're a believer, you've committed your life to Jesus Christ, invited Him to come into your heart, be your personal Lord and Savior, you have the other side promise of heaven, and no matter what goes on between this side and that side, heaven is real. Okay? Now we can hold on to that. So we've got to understand that, because no matter what storms we encounter in this life, there is that other. But it does not mean, and I want this to be very clear, does not mean that we can wave the flag of this so-called promise from Jesus and everything's got to be smooth sailing for us. Everybody understand that? Don't go there. Don't do that. That's not biblical. It's not right. See, the danger in claiming this as a promise to fix all, to guarantee that if you give your life to Jesus, the storms in your life will have to calm down when you ask God to calm them down, and you're just banking on that, and that's for sure. The problem with that is that it will lead to discouragement. It will lead to questioning your faith, because there will be those who say, "Well, you just don't have enough faith." That's baloney. Okay? It could also lead to even questioning the reality of God. Everybody understand that? Yeah, it's not some promise that we can go, "Oh, this means everything that I go through in life, all I've got to do is ask the Lord to take care of it, and He will," and it's a guarantee. It's not it. It's not it. What we do is we learn from this scene and what Jesus seeks to have His disciples understand, and use the context of Scripture accurately and appropriately, and then apply the truths to our life. All right? Make sense? You got that? It's important. So they're in this boat heading to the other side as Jesus has told them, and then the storm comes. Verses 35 to 38. On that day, when evening came, He said to them, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took Him, Jesus, along with them in the boat, just as He was, and other boats were with Him. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. Jesus himself was asleep, was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" So here we go. They get in the boat, they're on their way out, and this is described as a fierce gale of wind. The word means whirlwind or tempest. I think that we would understand it kind of like when we have some big thunderstorms that come up and you have a sudden downburst, and that rush of wind that just seems to come from nowhere, or maybe like straight line winds that just come with the beginnings of a storm. It's that kind of a situation. Now, it would be nice to know some of the details about this boat. How long was it? How high were the sides of the boat? We don't know that exactly. Some of the boats, the fishing boats that they were accustomed to using back in those days could be 15 to 25 feet long. And the sides of the boats were 3 to 4 feet high. I mean, this is a deep hulled kind of boat, very probably. And here we see that the waves are coming into it. I mean, however you look at this is quite a storm. And you think, how could Jesus sleep through that? I ever wonder, was he faking it? Was he just kind of had his eyes shut to see what they were going to do? The other thing is that he was the Lord. I guess he could sleep whenever he wanted to, right? I wish I could go out like that. But anyway, so he's asleep. And then let me add this. When you're in a boat with a couple of professional fishermen and they get scared, it's time to be scared. Right? These guys, look at that. Verse 38. "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? We're dying here, Lord. We're going under." It's time to be concerned about that. Ever feel like they did? You ever feel like in the situation that's going on in your life, it's Lord, don't you care about what's going on around me? Lord, are you not aware of the situation that I'm in? Lord, do you not see how bad things are in my life right now? That's the way they would. Ever feel like that? Verse 39. "And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Hush, be still.' And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm." This is what prompted this sermon. I've been studying on this for about 3 weeks and writing things here and there, looking up things. And this is one of those situations where last night I was really bothered by how this sermon, you're not supposed to apologize for sermons. I'm not your pastor, I'll apologize. I'm hoping that this all comes together. I mean to say it that way. Every Sunday there are 3 sermons that most pastors preach, right? There's the one you practiced. There's the one you actually preached. And then later on you're thinking about it, there's the one you wish you would have preached. So you kind of, is this all going to make sense? So for 3 weeks, I've been studying things on this because of something I found in this verse. I said to you last week, the sermon on hope for today, that I just needed that. And so following that, I began to look at, okay, what's next? Okay, I got my hope thing figured out. I got it back where it's supposed to be. My hope is in God and God alone, and don't worry about the mess around us and all that sort of thing. And okay, now I need to find some peace in the midst of all this. And this is the scene that I just felt led to go to, because I was thinking, I think there's one of the translations where Jesus says, "Peace, be still." And so that's kind of where I was going. The word here in the New American Standard is "hush, be still." And so I've been looking at this for about 3 weeks, and in reading this verse, I've never seen this before, never heard a professor speak about it, never heard another preacher say anything about it, never heard it preached, nothing of this. And I was reading in the commentary I mentioned last week, John Phillips' commentary that I really like, and he's the first person that I've ever seen bring this up. He mentions that there are 2 things after Jesus wakes up. There are 2 things that Jesus does. We typically focus on the second thing. We typically focus on what he says to the waves. But there's something he does before that we don't ever hear anything about. Verse 39 again. He got up and rebuked the wind. That's the first thing. And then said to the sea, "Hush, be still." We typically focus on the waves. But why are there waves? On a lake, there are waves because there's wind. Right? The ocean's different, but on a lake, you don't have waves unless you have wind. Fierce wind. This must have been a white-cap situation. I mean, the waves are coming into the boat, so this is a major wind. And he rebukes the wind. I wish we had the words to the rebuke. I wish we knew. Here, I'll say it again. I wish we had the words to the rebuke. He's paying attention. He wants to know what I'm saying. James is on this. What was it that he said to the wind? We don't know that. Now, Webster says that a rebuke is to reprimand. That's Webster's dictionary. There are two words that are used for rebuke. One of them means to rebuke, to punish, to convict the other regarding their fault. That's not the word Jesus uses. The word that Jesus uses here is the word that explains it this way, is merely to put a stop to something. So it is that Jesus rebuking the wind, or reprimanding the wind, however you want to say it, he was telling the wind to stop what it was doing. Wish I knew why. See, it's the wind that drives the waves. It's the force of the air moving about the water that causes turbulence. So in the storm that you may be in the storms that you face, what's driving the wind? What's causing the waves in your life? Where's the wind coming from? And remember also that in this storm, the disciples, this idea again, this shows this idea that, if anybody told you, maybe you're here today, you're a fairly young, new Christian, and somebody told you that, you give your life to Jesus, everything's going to be wonderful. They lied, okay? Most of us get that right, because you're going to go through life and you're going to have storms. There are going to be storms. Even when you're walking with the Lord. Remember, the disciples were where Jesus told them to be in the very moment of this. And not only that, they are with Jesus in the storm. He's right there. He rebuked the wind. And then he spoke to the waves. And the word that he used to quiet the waves is interesting. Hush, be still. The New American Standard translates it. It's silence. Hush. But it's an authoritative word. It's more than just going. It's to muzzle. That's what it means. It's to muzzle. To make it unable to speak. That's the word that Jesus gives to the waves. One commentary, and I mentioned this guy as well last week, Spyro Zodhiates, the word scholar. He says the word figuratively means to be calm as quiet water. To be on a lake where it's white capping, it's choppy, the waves are coming into the boat, to instantly feel becoming like glass. That's what took place. Verse 40, so now Jesus says two things to the disciples. And he said to them, why are you afraid? How is it that you have no faith? Why are you afraid? The word means timid, fearful. It means faithless. That's what the word afraid here means. Faithless. It can be said that being afraid is the absence of faith. Regarding that word. And we go back to the beginning of their adventure. Jesus said, let us go over to the other side. Had they forgotten that? Well, in a sense, yes. And don't we sometimes forget that too? When we're in the middle of a storm? When we get our eyes focused on the wind and the waves and all that's going wrong around us, when we in the moment forget His promise to be with us and to never leave us. Now that is a promise you can hold on to no matter what. Amen. Jesus said, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. He's there. We forget that we have an other side to get to His word. Like I mentioned last week, all the trouble is temporary. If for a little while, if necessary, remember that in the trial, 1 Peter. It's temporary. Remember Peter walking on the water? Jesus came to them in the storm, and Peter said, Lord, if it's you, let me come to you. And he gets out of the boat and is walking on the waves. What happened? He took his focus off of the Lord Jesus and began to get consumed by the wind and the waves and got afraid. When we allow fear to grab us, it pushes faith faith aside. Then Jesus asked them this other question. How is it that you have no faith? Very interesting question. For the disciples? I mean, aren't we saved by faith? Yes. Amen. Aren't we then to live our life by faith? Yes. Then why do I allow the storms of life to remove my faith? Why do we allow our storms to remove our faith? And listen, it's not that you or I are any less of a person or less of a Christian because we become fearful when the storms hit. Remember, in this scene, it is the very hand-picked disciples of Jesus, and they're afraid. And He's right there with them. His real physical presence is, they can see the guy, and they're afraid. So don't think that there's something wrong with you. Don't be too hard on yourself. Whenever sometimes a difficult situation comes and it scares you, you get afraid, and you have to catch yourself after a while. Wait a minute, I'm supposed to have faith. So in looking at these words and thinking about the fear-faith thing, we could understand it this way. If fear can push faith aside, then it stands to reason that faith can also push fear aside. Now, what it is that intrigues me about this discovery of sorts regarding Jesus rebuking the wind, what is it? And maybe I've thought about this a lot. Maybe I'm trying to find something more here than is here, but it seems to be important to me. Where's the wind coming from? What's causing the storm? Because, we tend to hear and focus on the waves, but if there were no wind, there would be no waves, right? So, I'm thinking on three things here. When the wind is fierce and the waves of life are crashing against you, what should we do? At this point, the list may grow over time. Number one, make sure you're in the right boat. In other words, make sure you are where Jesus wants you to be, and that you're doing what Jesus wants you to be doing. The disciples were with Jesus in the boat, and they were on the way to the other side, like Jesus told them they were to be doing. That's very important for us. Just look around real quickly when a storm is coming and say, am I where I'm supposed to be? And am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Number two, look to see who's in the boat with you. This is important. You want to be where Jesus wants you, doing what He wants you to be doing, but you also want to make sure you are with the right people. And let me say it this way too. That doesn't mean only Christian fellowship. We put ourselves in this little Christian cocoon and only associate with Christian people. Hey, maybe the calling that the Lord has on you is to be in the midst of lost people. Then that's who you're supposed to be around. A week ago, before coming in, I was at a conference. I think I mentioned this in Corpus Christi. And Dr. Doug Jackson, who is a professor down there, coordinates everything for Logston Seminary. They have an extension there in Corpus Christi, and he was talking to us about spiritual disciplines and things of that nature. And he mentioned this, that when, it wasn't him, it was Dr. G. Wilkes, who was our keynote speaker. He likes to run. He's a runner, a jogger. He just needs to repent. I don't know why anybody does that. You want to get around the block, you just drive and get there a lot quicker. Nevertheless. And so he runs with this group of people. And one day, most of them are believers, and there's one particular lady. She said she was telling him something about, she realized that the Lord had kind of let her know about where she was at in where she worked. If you do not work in the church setting, then you're out there in corporate America of sorts. This is great. If you have a job, you work for a company or business of some sort, and they pay you, and they also provide you benefits. Did you realize you are simply a minister with a corporate sponsor? I love that thought. You work for a company who pays you and it gives you benefits, and in the midst of that, you get to live out your Christianity and minister to people. And they're paying you for it. I love that idea. So it may be that God wants you to be in that environment. Then that's where you need to be doing what God is leading you to do. All right, so in the right boat, with the right people. Number 3, then, look for what is driving the wind. See, here's the problem that we have as Americans. Here's the don'ts. Don't, when you're in the storm, don't try to overcorrect the boat in the midst of the waves. In other words, don't try to fix the situation yourself. Right? This goes back to Tim the Toolman Taylor. Remember that tool time? And Tim's just going to fix it himself. That's we as Americans. That's us guys especially. We want to fix it. Don't try to fix it. Don't try and get out of the boat and swim to shore. That is, don't immediately try to get out of the situation. Back up. And don't seek advice for dealing with rough water. In other words, don't immediately try to find the experts. Now, that doesn't mean seeking counsel, godly counsel. We always, when things are going on, we want to seek out people that we know the Lord, serve the Lord, hear from the Lord, understand His Word. Those kind of people we need to be considering. But before that, realize if you're in the right boat and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're with the right people, seriously consider where the wind is coming from. Because wind can be either destructive or productive. The storms that we face are either an attack from the enemy, our spiritual enemy. In fact, John Phillips in his commentary speaks to this. He kind of relates this to the idea of Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, where the devil is called the prince of the power of the air. And it may indeed be a spiritual attack that is coming against you. Remember in Job? God allowed Satan to test Job. And part of that, the early stages of chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, the servant comes running to Job and says, all of your children were in the house having a feast together, and a great wind came and destroyed the house, and they're all dead. The enemy. Spiritual attack. Sometimes our own sin can be what causes the wind to blow storms into our life. Now, this would be the idea of being in the wrong boat, with the wrong people, doing the wrong things, and in the form of consequences to our actions, we bring the storm on ourselves. In real simple terms, that's just called being stupid. Right? And this is one of those things where some of these folks have heard me say this before. There are several things in our Christian lingo that years ago I gave up on. One of them is that, well, if it's God's will, it's going to happen. I don't know about you, but I've been around too many Christians who have screwed up God's will too much to know that's not true. There are some times when God has a will for us and we just flat mess it up. I mean, I believe God has a perfect will and a permissible will. And He will allow us to be stupid if we really want to be stupid. So, like I used to say to my kids, just don't be stupid. Young people, it's simple. Don't be stupid. Don't do stupid, right? Because it brings consequences and it will bring storms into your life. And I'm sure we all know people or have our own testimonies of how that is real. But then sometimes the storms, this may not sound real good, but sometimes the storms are about faith. Sometimes the storms are about trust. They're about growing us. They're about helping us understand how to experience the peace of God in the midst of storms. And remember, the Christian life is sometimes described as this. If you're not in a spiritual battle now, it's because you just came out of one or you're just about to go into one. Well, that's not really exciting, but that's just the way it is. So when you have things in the right place, trust them. Trust them. Ask. We have the privilege of asking and allowing Him to take control of the wind. He gives us the privilege. He in fact tells us that we need to do this. In Hebrews, come boldly before the throne of grace with confidence. We have the privilege of asking Him and then allowing Him to either muzzle the wind, Lord, or use the wind to push me on to where you want me to be. Don't just try to get out of it. I think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember those guys? Daniel chapter, Daniel chapter 3. Just back find it real quick. Remember these three guys? They weren't going to bow before the king. And so the king threatens to throw them in the fiery furnace. Remember that?
Yeah.
And you remember how they spoke to the king? Sometimes I think we misread this. Daniel chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. They're speaking to the king about going into the fiery furnace. If it be so, if you don't know us in, our God whom we serve, listen carefully, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire. And He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if He does not, wow. Let it be known to you, O king, that we're not going to serve your gods, worship the golden image that you serve. Those guys said, look, here's our testimony. The God we serve, you think you're something? You think the fire's hot? The God we serve is able to deliver us out of that fire. He can do it. Amen. But even if He doesn't, because what they say, either way it goes, He will deliver us out of your hand. Because here's how that works. You throw us in the fire, we get burned up, we just go into His presence, we're out of your hand. You throw us in the fire, and He somehow miraculously brings us out of it, it's going to change your life, and we'll be out of your hand. But they didn't say, oh, we have a guarantee. We have a guarantee, we'll just call out to our God, He'll extinguish the fire. They didn't say that. They said, we know our God is able. But however it happens, we're going to trust Him. We're going to praise Him. We're going to worship Him. That's what happened. See, it doesn't mean we aren't allowed to ask for help. We just need to realize there's often something more that can be seen. Something more that can be experienced for us. There's something more that can be done in our lives by God, by our going through the storms or the fire. This morning before we came, I was watching a church service. James McDonald, really like him. He's in the Chicago area. And he was talking about the love of God and how sometimes, we don't see it this way, but sometimes God allows pain in our lives because He loves us. Because sometimes we get to walking away from God and He allows something painful, and that situation brings us back to Him because He loves us and wants us back. Because had we not gone through the pain, we might have continued to walk away. That's love. When you know you're in the right boat, you're with the right people, you're doing the right things, and a storm wind begins to blow, look to see where the wind is coming from. And if you realize it is the enemy coming against you, then trust the Lord to deal with him and to give you strength and increase your faith. And then, like Job did, endure the storm. I know that's not sweet by and by, happy American relief, American theology. I know that. But that's just me. Sometimes we've got to endure the storm. If it's not the enemy, and it's not because of your own bad decisions and your own sin, then perhaps the Lord is helping you to grow. And He's trying to get you to where He wants you to be a little quicker. And that's why the wind is blowing so hard. It's helping you get there. So in that sense, enjoy the storm. Lord, I know I'm not being stupid. Lord, I know I'm where you want me to be, and I'm doing what you want me to do, and I'm with the right people in the midst of doing that. God, this is tough. So, I'm just going to trust you, Lord. I'm going to put the sails up, and I'm going to let you push me where I'm, and I'm going to, best I can, I'm going to enjoy this. Now, if you do realize you're in the wrong boat, get out and swim to Jesus. Get out and swim to Jesus. Get there as quick as you can. We're in the boat with Jesus. No matter how bad the storm is or how bad it seems to be, we can still experience the calming peace of His presence when we trust Him. Paul said to the Philippians in chapter 4, Philippians chapter 4 about this. great verse. When he's talking about rejoicing in the Lord, he says, let your gentle spirit be known to all men. Show your testimony. Why? Because the Lord is near. Be anxious for nothing. Another translation says, don't worry about anything. It's hard for me because I'm a worrier by nature. Did I get that from you, Mom? Is that where I live? But in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Lord, I'd really love it if you'd stop the wind and calm the waves. I'd really like that, Lord. It's okay to ask. Verse 7 is awesome. When we're rejoicing in it, no matter what, when we're living for it, no matter what, and yet there's a storm going on, and we're fighting anxiety and panic and worry and all that, we're giving it to Him. We're making our requests known to Him. Verse 7 says, peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension. And it's beyond words. Here's the great part of the verse. Will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Here's why that's powerful. Because the word for guard was the word that was used in the military for a sentry, a Roman soldier who was on sentry marching about something that he was protecting. The peace of God will march about and guard, protect your heart and your mind in Christ. Then there can be peace in this. Then we can go through it and we can rejoice in it, knowing that God's doing a work in our life. We can trust Him. The thing is, make sure you're in the right road. You're doing the right thing. You're with the right people. And when the storm comes, pay attention to where it's going. Don't get caught up in the waves. Go in the boat. Jesus is in the boat. Look to see where they're coming from. And then what needs to be done. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you, Lord, again, that it not only gives us instruction, but it gives us help. And I know this is going to be one of those sermons where tomorrow I'm going to, I should have said this, or could have said it better this way. I'm so grateful, Lord, you're able to use the foolishness of preaching to help us. In a group of people this size, there is no doubt some storm situations. There are folks in storms. So I pray you'd help them. Lord, that you comfort them to know that you're with them. And that you would, through your Holy Spirit, give them wisdom as they evaluate their situation. And then, as they trust you. Lord, I would desire that the wind would calm down. The waves would settle. But I understand that's not always your promise. So if it's not, if there's someone here today in the midst of a storm and they're right where they need to be, then I pray that you would help them to enjoy the storm, knowing that it's getting them to a better place in life, making them stronger, increasing their faith, helping them to see your glory. Perhaps it's because there's a lost person or there's a struggling Christian watching them. And you know you can trust this person to endure the storm, and the testimony for that person watching will draw them to it. Or it may be something we have no idea about, but it's for your purpose. Help us to think about that. And help us to trust you. Now, Lord, I pray if there's someone here today who's realized they're not even in the boat, they're drowning in the waves because they've never come to Jesus. Well, Father, I pray that you've been able to speak to their heart in the days before today and the weeks before today. And today they get it. The lights come on and they understand, and today they're ready to give their life to Jesus. And Lord, I pray you would draw them to yourself. When we have this invitation, and there'll be someone here at the front to greet them, they'll have the courage to walk down the aisle and simply say to that person, I need Jesus. Folks of this church, be ready and able to help them begin a loving, growing, intimate, personal, eternal relationship. So Lord, I pray, if that's the need, give that person the courage today to get into the boat. Any other decisions, Lord, that need to be made? Lord, I pray you give us the courage to be obedient. Lord, do in us what only you can do, what we need you to do. We might live for you and give you glory. For that, I thank you. For that, I praise you. And I pray it in the wonderful, matchless name of Jesus, our Savior. Let's stand together. We'll have this time of invitation. People are going to be here in front. If you have a need,